Ash is actually in quite a solid spot right now. His high raw damage with a variety of weapons and setups, alongside his invisibility, make him very much good enough, kinda all the time. He offers not much in the way of utility, but that's not really his job as an assassin frame, so it makes sense. It's not really like, bad marketing. However, I find that some of his kit is really left lacking, and his standard weapon platform setups are a bit uninspired, like a lot of weapon platform setups are anyways, but right now Bladestorm feels a bit too slow, and Shuriken is just not useful at all. I know I can't fix everything, but I think these few changes I am making will make a world of difference, and I am grateful to say that unlike the Chroma and Loki reworks I've done, this won't be a huge change to Ash's gameplay loop. I'm adding literally one big thing that I think will make a massive difference in making this frame feel the way I think he was meant to when he first got reworked. So I'm super excited. Basically, thank you guys for the support, subs, likes, hypes, whatever. Sorry the channel's been a bit slow recently. I'm working on it. Just a lot going on. Love you guys to death. And real quick, I'm just introducing a little change to my rework videos. I'm separating changes that I have high confidence in like a more basic text, probably white or yellow, and then the changes that are just for fun will be in blue or some other fun color. I will try to auditorily relay that information, but I might forget sometimes. I want to include my for fun ideas because I'm not going to be able to get them across anywhere else, so they're going to be put in this video. Let's begin with what Ash does relatively well and move into what's lacking from Ash's kit. This is from the perspective of what I feel a frame like Ash is intended to have, not from the perspective of a frame needing to have absolutely everything. Also, I do have quite a lot of experience on Ash, so I'm fairly familiar with what he's got going on. Firstly, Ash's survivability. Ash has easy and accessible invisibility, the penultimate form of survivability. Smokescreen just makes him impossible to kill in 95% of content. The 5% that kills invisibility is very rare, and there's other ways around it. It's simple, a low bar to clear, but survivability is a very important bar to clear. So even if you do it with something as simple as invisibility, smokescreen is accessible and simple to use. Ash has really high single target damage through both his passive, teleport, and Bladestorm, along with the basic, weapons platform stuff that he has going on. Unfortunately, single target damage doesn't really have much of a place in the current Warframe meta. He can sometimes spread the damage beyond single target with proper weaponry choices and modding, but that's not really his own kit giving it mileage there. Mobility. Ash, when properly set up for success, is deceptively fast. Teleport, and especially with its augment teleport rush, which is massively underrated, allow Ash to traverse maps incredibly quickly. So Ash has a really solid foundation for an assassin Warframe. However, parts of his kit come up seriously short. Shuriken. Shuriken effectively does nothing in its current state. Ash throws out 2 wet toilet paper rolls, and that is about it. Seeking Shuriken, its augment, can help with single target, but that's also about it, and armor barely means anything anymore anyways, and this is only against armored foes, which is generally 60-50% of the foes you're going to be going against, and even then, again, armor is not as effective as it used to be. Kit execution speed. Ash's gameplay loop outside of weapons platforming is really slow and clunky. Normally some clunk is permissible, but current Warframe is already so fast and Ash is really slow in terms of actually executing his inner kit game plan. This problem is the absolute core of Ash's problem, and we're going to be taking a lot of steps to modernize his kit without touching his identity. I like the way Ash functions. He's got a lot more that needs to go on, but we're going to talk more about this when I talk about the solutions. So let's get started with my Ash rework. Starting with Ash's passive, which I'm actually just purely adding to. I think his passive is really solid. Slash is quite weak right now in the meta, but I feel like making a change to it based purely on the fact that it's not meta is a little short-sighted. So I'm keeping the slash component of the passive, but I'm adding another feature. Let's begin. This is called Practiced Assassin. Every finisher kill that Ash scores yields a stack of Practiced Assassin. For each stack of Practiced Assassin, gain plus 1% finisher speed with both standard finishers and Bladestorm's shadow finishers, along with 0.5% movement speed. Maxes out at 100 stacks. This will give Ash the base levels of speed necessary to start executing his kit as he ramps up bodies, while keeping and enhancing his theme. With the changes I have to Shuriken, I'm confident that Ash will feel much better to play. And again, keeping the slash passive as usual, maybe buffing its numbers a little bit, but again, I think it's just kind of a meta thing. Like Hunters, I still have, like, Hunters Munitions was a very oppressive meta for quite a duration of time, so I think making changes purely from like a meta third eye perspective is a little bit, again, short-sighted and unwise. Moving on to Shuriken. Right now, Shuriken are ineffective in damage, and the only utility they really bring is for the augment, which again, armored foes is not, that's maybe half the roster of enemies, and armor is just not as effective as it used to due to the, again, armor and HP changes, and likewise, slash is also not as effective. So kind of getting double whammied there in terms of Ash just not feeling as strong. So I want to give Shuriken a lot more to do. They are the focal point of this rework, actually. So I'm going to lead with the simple changes and then go over the more complex one. That way you can kind of break down. And I'm also going to do an illustration for the more complex change as well. Starting with the simple changes. Ash now fires an additional number of shuriken, scaling with ability range. This is similar to the way Zaku's gun and disarm, Grasp of Loke, scales with range, just giving it kind of more to do. This gives Ash more build variety, kind of avoids that dump all stats but strength and duration trap that many weapon platform frames fall into, and more shurikens is going to help with what I plan to do with this rework. Having more of them will actually be a blessing. Next, each shuriken aims to distribute amongst enemies. To explain this, shuriken, basically, the goal of the shuriken's AI will be to hit one target apiece. I believe shuriken kind of already works like this, but I would definitely take a look at the code and make sure it's working properly, so that, similar to Dante's birds, who prioritize debuffing as many targets as possible, shuriken would operate the same way. Lastly, for the simple changes, now provides a damage vulnerability debuff. To me, this makes perfect sense in terms of an assassin's kit. Marking essentially single targets, or base number is 5, so 5, 6, 7, 8 targets, helping get more mileage out of your entire arsenal. So whether you're using instant damage vulnerability debuff, so whether you're using status, whether you're using direct damage, whether you're using blade storm, weapons, whatever you're trying to get mileage out of, a damage vulnerability debuff is essentially inverted roar, right? Meaning that it's going to be able to buffer up any build that it wants to work with, and it still stays in theme of, a slight single target priority, but sending out 6 or 7 shurikens, don't leave a comment please, could be really good in terms of buffing any kit you decide to throw it into. So taking a look at the more complicated change here, of course I've launched MS Paint for you. I promise it's not too difficult, but basically the goal is to incorporate Bladestorm in a way that feels snappier and more satisfying. So now when Ash throws shuriken at targets, he will of course mark them with the aforementioned damage vulnerability, but he will also give them a mark similar to the one that starts. Oh Jesus, man, what am I doing? He will mark enemies with the same kind of mark that Bladestorm provides, except the big difference between these two is that these marks of Bladestorm are detonated when Bladestorm is first cast. Currently, the way Bladestorm works is it's very much a seek and destroy, and casting that seek part hits the brakes on what should be a fast-paced assassin kit. The goal here is to basically, instead of having Bladestorm be 2 sections, have it cut into 4. The first one is Ash's normal gameplay, where he can throw shuriken and then mark enemies. Upon casting Bladestorm to enter the seek phase, shadows will already be flying. This is the second phase. So any enemy hit by shuriken will have the shadows, performing finishers on them, essentially. At that point, Ash can then proceed to seek new targets, because normally the problem with the seek and destroy is you put your crosshair on them. Guess what else you can do with an enemy that you have in your crosshairs? Pull the trigger, right? So in this case, shuriken can provide a kind of phase 1 Bladestorm, and then phase 2 Bladestorm can continue the traditional way it does, but the beauty of it is that during the seek phase, you now have the shuriken marked enemies dying to finishers, and you can set up the next wave of targets to die to the second Bladestorm. This way you can keep it up in perpetuity. That's a word for sure. Then during the second phase of Bladestorm, after you've seeked and destroyed, then any additional shuriken thrown will continue the Bladestorm, meaning that any shuriken thrown will basically manifest a shadow in the order that the shuriken were cast and the targets were hit. This will basically allow for infinite blade storms, as far as I can understand, or just a better phasic gameplay, where again you throw shurikens at the enemies, you cast blade storm to seek, enemies start dying. You seek the enemies, more enemies start dying. Throw more shuriken, more enemies start dying. This way you have what is effectively a full caster Ash build if you decide to opt for it. This combined with practiced assassin will move the finishers by way quicker than they normally would, and allow Ash to kind of scour the map way quicker than he normally would. Same with the future teleport changes I make here, and an additional change I thought of having, which I guess I can mention it now, is when Ash does join the fray with teleport, I think maybe Bladestorm should do some extra damage. I should have left that in the Bladestorm section, but honestly, I came up with it just now. Yeah, essentially, this would kind of make Bladestorm a more satisfying piece of utility, a piece of damage, but make it feel better to use, and also incorporate Ash's dead ability inside of it. I think, to me, that is a perfect change. Let's continue with the rework. Hopefully, you guys understand this. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. In addition to those main changes, I'm throwing in a little for fun change here, where I'm adding the hold cast to Shuriken. Hold to cast, Ash fires a larger single shuriken that applies triple the damage vulnerability and instantly spawns a Bladestorm Shadow to perform a finisher onto the enemy. This large shuriken is manually aimed and can land a headshot. This is just a goofy addition I wanted to add. It's a Naruto OG reference, and I thought it would be cool for more single target settings like Disruption, or just a I don't know, random poor bum Eximus where you don't want to teleport to him, I guess? I don't know. I just think it'd be really funny, and it would add more to that kind of like single target priority that Ash has going on. Moving into Smokescreen, and luckily Smokescreen's in a pretty fantastic spot. It's just kind of like Loki's invisibility. I just want to touch up its Augment Smoke Shadow to give it kind of a power I feel like it always should have had. So currently in Smoke Shadow state, it gives 150% critical chance. This scales additively with stuff like critical delay, and overall it's good. It is good. It's flat. It's not flat. It's a flat value that doesn't scale with any mods. So my only change I would make to Smoke Shadow is reducing its base power to 100% and having it scale with power strength. I feel like modding this ability should impact more. Right now it only scales with duration, and I just think that it's very unlikely that Ash will go like something like overextended, and so to me this will basically always lead to a DPS increase. And also, again, make Smoke Shadow feel more impactful. I think there is a place, or plenty of places in Warframe, for mods that don't, or for abilities or augments that don't really scale much with mods and just provide a lot of upfront value. Totally makes sense, especially in like high range characters. But to me, Smoke Shadow should definitely scale with strength, and so very simple change here. Moving on to Teleport. Teleport, and specifically Teleport Rush, are actually in fairly strong spots for how simple they are. I would just add like a few smaller changes. Even though what they do is very simple, I think that some buffs to make Ash feel better. I'm making this video already, right? So a couple quick, simple changes. So first, Teleport, it deals finisher damage to targets, so stripping defense is not necessary, but the target being teleported to is stripped of any overguard. So if, again, this is a single target ability, I think that this is kind of going to be a trend in a lot of my future content, where targets or abilities that are meant to do damage to a single target should basically always remove overguard. I think this is a very simple premise. It makes total sense. So the target being teleported to is stripped of any overguard and cannot gain more for a duration. Additionally, Hold Cast has a freestyle teleport, exactly like Kalervo's Wrathful Advance. These two abilities are totally distinct enough, one dealing a heavy attack, which is in line with Kalervo's playstyle, and one doing a finisher, which makes perfect sense for Ash. I just think that there's no reason that Ash shouldn't have that freestyle teleport available to him, as it makes Kalervo so much faster and would make Ash much faster as a result as well. The last change here would be making Teleport Rush an Exilus mod. It's very much a QOL mod, providing that parkour velocity and refreshing smokescreen quite a bit, so to me it makes perfect sense that it belongs in the Exilus slot instead of taking up a normal mod slot. These changes are fairly small, but I feel like wrap up Ash quite nicely in terms of making him feel much more mobile and rewarded for taking Teleport Rush. Teleport Rush is incredibly good and adds so much depth to Ash's playstyle, but sacrificing mod slots, especially when you're usually going to take Smoke Shadow as well, and maybe Seeking Shuriken even, it's a little bit annoying, and sacrificing mod slots for QOL augments is kind of a big struggle point of Warframe currently, where you don't want to equip fun augments because you don't want to give a mod slot. If you're going to equip an augment, it usually has to be really, really OP to warrant its existence there. So I think for me, again, additional to the overguard changes, I think that QOL augments should be made Exilus. Just personal opinion. Teleport Rush is a big example. I just think that promoting teleport's quick movement is something that should absolutely be done in Ash's kit, even though it's not an inherently flawed ability. I just think these changes would make it much more useful and make Ash feel much more complete in the same way that Clervo feels. Moving on to Bladestorm, and this is a big part of the conversation, in addition to the Shuriken changes I mentioned, which I'll rehash on. Bladestorm is basically the core that makes Ash, Ash. It's his identifying ability, I would say. It's an ability with so much conceptual swag and presence, but falls short quite hard. My goal here, combined with the changes to Shuriken and the new passive edition, is to just make it feel more intertwined into the rest of his kit. Right now it feels like Ash has to kind of slam on the brakes to use Bladestorm properly. I'd like to make it so that Ash can at least coast comfortably while making Bladestorm function. So we have the changes to Shuriken. Of course, this will give Ash the ability to mark enemies in a much more snappy fashion while performing other gameplay tasks. Additionally, this one I am a little bit unsure about, but increasing the critical chance on Bladestorm from 5 to 20% and the critical damage from 1.2 to 2. Ash already deals ridiculous damage with Bladestorm, and my goal here isn't really to up Bladestorm's damage. We could lower the base damage if you want to change the critical modifiers, but for me, I want to make modding for it more unique, right? As of now, you can just throw on Wrathful Advance, which gives flat crit, Crepuscular and Tenacious, which give that additional flat critical damage, and now he's a monster. Okay, but that's really the only way to get it set up properly. So I feel like that through internal mods, these kind of stats should be accessed both internally and externally as well. That way the player can choose how they want to mod. Modding Bladestorm right now, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, feels a little uninspired due to its linearity, which I think is okay sometimes. But when it comes to these exalted weapons, I like having a little bit of different ways to build. And then as a last change, which I'll do an illustration for, subsequent Shuriken thrown during Bladestorm 2, as I named it during the Shuriken section, will continue the Bladestorm. So if you are in the second phase of Bladestorm and you're throwing Shuriken still, Shadow finishers will still continue. Basically, it's the second barrage of finishers on top of Bladestorm 2. This will basically allow you to keep a perpetual Bladestorm, like it's in the name, would be pretty cool. Which, if it's a gameplay choice you want to make, the more Shurikens you throw, if you can spam enough, basically you can continue to have that Bladestorm moving. I think that this could be obviously very strong, but it's not really, it's quite par for the course in terms of what strong frames and Warframe can already do. So yeah, throwing more Shuriken during Bladestorm's second phase, after doing the Seek and Destroy, will basically perpetually keep the Bladestorm moving. For Bladestorm, I'm adding a little change for fun here, but again, this is just kind of my little. I'm not going to be able to get the change out anywhere else besides this video, so it's going here, even though I don't have the utmost confidence in it. So kills with Bladestorm 2, the second phase, load Ash with more Shuriken at a rate of maybe 1 Shuriken per 3 kills. You know, scaling with range, scaling with strength, I don't know. And on Shuriken's next cast, the additional Shuriken are fired. So basically, phase 2 Bladestorm would build up Shuriken, and then this extra Shuriken would be fired on the next cast. And yeah, that wraps up my Ash rework. Again, I think Ash is fundamentally quite sound. He just has moderately outdated gameplay options and could really use a fresh coat of paint and a minor tune-up. Shuriken is made to be actually good in this rework. Teleport allows him to traverse the battlefield even faster than he could before, instead of being gated to those finishers, and the parkour velocity from Teleport Rush will be more accessible. Bladestorm should have much easier uptime, ease of use, modding compatibility, and not just that, but Bladestorm will feel more like an ability that you don't want to get rid of. Which right now it's one of the easier ones to get rid of. Obviously Shuriken sucks, but we've changed that as well. It's nice that you don't have to full send into the Wrathful, Tenacious, everything setup. You could actually take other helmet options if you still want to do a Bladestorm build. Maybe you just want to stack the movement speed from Practiced Assassin, and that's it. Or you want to enter Bladestorm and never leave, sending Shuriken out until the end of time. This and a small DPS increase because of Shuriken's damage vulnerability and Smoke Shadow strength scaling buff would lead to an Ash that is not only given more diversity in his kit, but an overall stronger execution of his core themes. Thank you guys so much for watching. Love you guys to death, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Hey, what did you think about this rework? Let me know in the comments. Again, thank you guys for the support. Sorry the channel's been a bit slower recently, but I promise I'm keeping up. I don't intend on missing any Fridays, despite my upcoming busy season. Y'all take care. Love you. See ya. Bye-bye.